Hi, I'm Caroline Labor, money mindset expert and CPA. Today we're going to talk about how toxic money can affect your money mindset. So let's get into it. So what is toxic money? Now, if you've never heard this term before, I'm not surprised because who would have thought that money could be toxic? Well, let me explain toxic money. Toxic money comes about when you have a situation where money's owed to you, and you might even feel like you were cheated out of that money. So it came about through unfair circumstances, happens commonly around issues with inheritance or lawsuits, settlements, or it could even be money that when it was finally paid to you, it felt like there was a huge battle or a fight around it. So, the whole experience of getting that money or perhaps not getting that money has been massively negative. So some specific examples include being owed money, and usually where it's from someone who's close to you, like a friend or a relative. Also relying on compensation or child support from perhaps a previous partner. So even though that money might play a really important role, it can be toxic because of the emotional price around it. And many people, and I'll say women in particular, will often stay in a bad toxic relationship because financially it's supporting their lifestyle. And there's no judgment here, by the way, whatsoever with any of this. I'm just explaining the toll that toxic money takes on our money mindset. So then you have court battles. So, this is really common with inheritance. So often siblings, or parents and children can end up fighting over inheritance and what they believe they're entitled to. So ultimately, what all the different types of toxic money have in common is that if you're expecting to receive or you're actually receiving any money that you feel you need, to survive, but it comes with a really negative and high emotional price, then that is effectively toxic money. And when I say an emotional price, like on the surface, it's the exchange. So having to deal with the other party, all of that is really negative and it's taxing and it really takes its toll on you. But actually the bigger thing that comes with toxic money is that there's this whole other hidden price that you pay, and most people don't even realize it. And what that price is that when you are involved in toxic money, basically if you look back on that situation when the toxic money experience first happened, a lot of people will look at that and say, since that day, I've never been able to earn any money. So toxic money is not only negative and toxic because of the encounter with the other person involved and with the experience of how hard it is to, maybe get that money. It's a lot more to do with the toll that it takes on you as a person and your ability to bring other forms of money and healthy forms of money into your life. And so ultimately what happens is that receiving or really wanting and waiting for that toxic money, it keeps people poor because it really kills their drive in a way, because there's so much focus on trying to get money from this negative flow from such a negative experience. And if you're someone who is experiencing something like that, then what I want you to do is to think about the emotions around that money. Think about how consuming it is. Think about the people who are involved in that situation. Maybe they were involved in the past, maybe they're still involved. So, how fresh are those emotions for you? And when you think about that situation, what are you saying to yourself? What are your thoughts about it? And what are you really focusing on? And you want to really reflect on how much time this is taking up in your life and whether that is taking a toll on your ability to, be able to focus on other more productive things. And so the real danger with toxic money is that energy keeps people stuck in such a negative, vicious cycle where they can't break out of it and do more empowering things. And so what I actually wanted to share with you now is a very personal experience, and a very recent one actually. So this is my own toxic money experience. So, you know, I used to go down that list of all the toxic money examples and I'd say, no, 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 none of that. But very recently, I had my own experience of having to move houses. So it came about quite suddenly because I have 2 dogs who lived with a previous partner, and those dogs suddenly got sick and my former partner couldn't care for them anymore. And so really just out of the blue, I found myself taking back over the care of my 2 dogs. And, you know, I'm absolutely crazy about these dogs and it was a no-brainer. But the problem was I was living in an apartment that didn't allow pets. And I had actually just renewed my lease as well. And so I very quickly had to, you know, take drastic action. I had to break my lease. And in Australia, when you break a lease, there's a price, so a cost that comes with breaking that lease, and the amount can vary. And in my case, the terms of my lease agreement meant that it was really open-ended. And so I found myself in a situation where I was paying enormous amounts of money to try and get out of this lease. And by this stage, I had moved into back into my own house actually. So I was paying that mortgage, paying rent on a place I was no longer in. Anyway, it turned into like quite a negative situation. And so I reached a point where I felt that the break costs on that lease were really unreasonable. And so I won't go into all the detail, but in effect, you know, I ended up being caught in a situation where between myself and another party, we just couldn't agree on, you know, who should pay what amount of money. And, you know, things went so far, so a lot of communications back and forth. And this ended up going to like a sort of formal tribunal, like a hearing type environment. And all of this, by the way, took months. So this process went on for actually well over 6 months, you know, and through that whole time, like in the end, I found myself saying, well, what is this all worth? Like, you know, we're talking about like a few $1,000s here. Like when I stopped and thought about what toll it was really taking on me, and how much time it had taken away from, you know, me focusing on growing my business and being able to put, you know, the effort into like acquiring new clients, you know, purely because of physically the amount of time I would spend, you know, gathering paperwork, preparing arguments, getting ready to, you know, refute different arguments, like just surrounded by so much negative energy that, you know, in the end when we were sort of there in the formal proceedings, it ended just up being, you know, kind of like a one-on-one discussion. So I was sort of blessed in a way that it really just ended up being about the people in the situation. And then I realized that I just had to, you know, walk away. So I ended up settling for, you know, much less than I felt that I was owed in the situation. But you get to a point where you've really got to admit to yourself that, you know, dragging this on any longer for money that even if you feel you're so entitled to it, you've got to weigh up what the cost of that is. And in my case, if I allowed that to continue, it was going to be months of more time away from my business, you know, all for some dispute that happened ages ago. And so, you know, it's very real. Like I totally get the emotions and the cycle around toxic money. And so the lesson in this is that if you want to move up and free yourself from the hold of toxic money, you actually need to get to a point where you're willing to let go of that money. And I know if you're listening to this and you're in one of those situations, that can, you know, feel extremely painful. Like you might be sitting there going, no way, there is no way I'm walking away from that. But honestly, for your own peace of mind, for your own, like your health, your mental health, your physical health, there becomes like this huge opportunity cost. You've got to say, for me to get that money, what other price am I paying and is it really worth it? And obviously that's something that, you know, you've got to answer for yourself, but to be able to free yourself of that energy, like having been through this firsthand, I can't tell you enough what a relief it is. Like now that I've walked away from that situation, like the whole money bit, you know, feels irrelevant in the big scheme of things. And you walk away just going, it's over. I never have to deal with that again. There never has to be another negative exchange around that situation. And, you know, to just be totally free to go and focus on something so much more productive and empowering, and just be able to move on with your life. Like it's so hard to, you know, put a dollar figure on that. Like this is your life, it's your peace of mind. And the thing I want you to realize, if you're sitting there having that debate in your head and going, yeah, I hear you, but there's no way I'm walking away from that money, I'm entitled to that money. What I want you to realize is the reason that in many cases toxic money stops people from earning money anywhere else is because we end up imposing self-limiting circumstances on ourselves so that we can feel entitled to that money. You know, it's a bit like, and this happens with people who are on compensation. And a lot of people will not realize that subconsciously they're keeping themselves sick, and they're trying to prove to the world that like they can't work, you know, they can't get up and do things, because if they do, they're going to stop receiving that compensation. And I'm, you know, in no way suggesting that there aren't people with like very serious, you know, illnesses and conditions, but I'm saying that in a lot of cases, the emotional cost starts to compound what that person is experiencing because they're so unwilling to let go of receiving that money, so they will keep themselves stuck in really bad circumstances. And this applies, by the way, to all the categories of toxic money. And so, you know, even in my own case, like there were elements of every time someone would ask me, you know, how was it going with breaking that lease, I would just get sucked into a negative spiral. You know, I'd talk about it in such a negative way, and sometimes it would just end up kind of, you know, ruining a big chunk of my whole day. And so you don't realize the amount of time you end up putting into these toxic money situations, and it all adds up. And in the end, you know, it really isn't worth it. So if you want to move on from your toxic money and you want to get to a position where you can make your own money from so many other sources, then I really challenge you to think long and hard about the price you're paying to receive your toxic money. And I want to challenge you to let it go and walk away and just move on with your life. So I hope that's been a bit of an eye-opener, maybe a little painful, but you know what? Sometimes we need a bit of pain in life to get that reality check and to really move on with our life and move on to bigger and better things. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked today's video, be sure to hit that thumbs up button and leave any questions, comments or video ideas in the comments below. And most importantly, hit that subscribe button and that bell notification. Also, if you're interested in my free money mindset training, click on the link in the first comment below and it'll take you to a page where you can enter your name and email so I can send it straight to you. See you next time.